Ryan Reynolds' lawyer has officially quit after being ordered to carry out what insiders are calling one of the most absurd legal distractions Hollywood has ever witnessed, a move that Ryan allegedly believed would magically erase Blake Lively's mounting courtroom disaster. But instead of going along with the plan, the lawyer reportedly exposed everything, transforming Ryan's supposed power play into a public humiliation that spiraled out of control because Daniel Keene, the attorney who once agreed to represent Hollywood's so-called golden couple, has now formally resigned, and he did not exit quietly or discreetly. He walked away carrying receipts, documentation, and warnings that have since ignited panic across legal circles, as leaked internal memos reveal Keene refused to proceed with 3 explosive filings that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds personally demanded be submitted. Filings that were framed as aggressive legal strategy but were, in reality, reckless career-ending gambits, with one involving the submission of altered text messages, another hinging on a harassment claim supported by a timeline that failed to align with official court records, and a third built around a sweeping accusation that Justin Baldoni intentionally caused emotional trauma tied loosely to a movie premiere, a theory that lacked evidentiary grounding, and, according to sources familiar with the situation, Keene immediately recognized the danger, understanding that filing those motions would likely trigger a Rule 11 violation, a serious sanction meaning the court believed an attorney knowingly filed frivolous or misleading claims, and beyond that, the Bar Association would almost certainly open a formal ethics inquiry, something no veteran lawyer with decades of reputation would risk, making the situation feel less like advocacy and more like a professional ambush. So Keene did what any rational attorney would do. He bailed, but not before issuing what insiders describe as a scorched earth warning, delivered through a confidential letter sent directly to the bar and later leaked, where Keene allegedly labeled Blake and Ryan's legal strategy as legal terrorism, not a term of art, but plain language meant to convey that the case was constructed on lies, weaponized public relations, and celebrity entitlement rather than law. And the letter reportedly detailed how the lawsuit was never intended to prove harm or seek justice, but to manipulate headlines, intimidate critics, and punish dissent, with Keene stating bluntly that the case had no legitimate legal foundation and he refused to sacrifice his license or integrity for it, while people close to the legal team say the final meetings between Keene and the couple were intensely uncomfortable, described as more like hostage negotiations than professional briefings, with Blake insisting that the court did not need evidence, only emotion, and Ryan remaining mostly silent until suggesting they lean harder into shaping public perception, a moment that reportedly crystallized Keene's realization that they were chasing a narrative, not a verdict, and he wanted no part of it. And by the time he walked out, staffers said Keene appeared shaken, withdrawn, and deeply disturbed, like someone who had glimpsed behind the curtain and regretted it, as he stopped taking internal calls, skipped strategy sessions, and cleared out his office over a single weekend, and when a partner asked why he would leave in the middle of a high-profile case, Keene allegedly replied that this was not a legal case at all, but a public relations campaign wearing a legal costume, and perhaps the most damaging detail emerged from his resignation memo circulated internally, where he explained how Blake and Ryan pressured him to pursue tactics that bordered on fraud, including presenting fabricated evidence, ignoring discovery obligations, and drafting motions designed for viral impact rather than legal merit, even accusing them of requesting court filings be timed with press leaks to maximize media engagement, a tactic he referred to as narrative litigation, a phrase he said he hoped never to use again. But what ultimately pushed him out was not just ethical pressure, it was fear, because Keene believed that once the strategy collapsed, he would be positioned as the fall guy, and judging by the growing public backlash, that fear appears justified, as legal insiders say Keene's exit letter is already circulating as a cautionary tale about what happens when celebrity clients treat the justice system like a storyline, because Blake and Ryan were not content with winning. They wanted obliteration, nearly dragging Keene off a professional cliff in the process, and the breaking point was not a single bad idea but a cascade of demands so reckless and legally radioactive they earned an internal code name, Operation Red Ink, allegedly coined by Ryan Reynolds to describe a barrage of motions designed to flood headlines rather than courtrooms, with the most shocking element being a multi-state subpoena targeting Justin Baldoni's childhood therapist under the pretense of uncovering psychological patterns. Despite the therapist having no connection to the case, no public statements, and no treatment relationship in decades, a move Keene recognized as intimidation masquerading as legal process, which he refused to sign, though Blake allegedly continued pushing, emailing him repeatedly. In early May 2024, urging reconsideration of pretrial narrative shaping, emails staffers described as desperate rather than persuasive, and matters escalated further when Keene was asked to draft a filing accusing Baldoni of intentional infliction of emotional distress, a severe allegation typically supported by witnesses and verified records. Yet the only evidence provided was a series of text messages claimed to be from 2018, messages whose metadata revealed edits, prompting Keene to demand verification, only to receive a Dropbox folder labeled clean versions, making it clear they expected him to submit falsified evidence under oath, a line he refused to cross. And 1 week later, during a closed-door call with Ryan and Blake, the pressure reportedly intensified, confirming his decision to walk away before everything imploded completely. A veteran entertainment lawyer found himself at the center of a spiraling crisis when a high-profile celebrity couple allegedly pushed a legal strategy that blurred the line between courtroom defense and brand management, urging him to weave elements of a blockbuster superhero franchise into formal filings, believing that if the actor's legal posture could be framed as performance art or satire, then damaging press coverage might be dismissed as part of a larger parody narrative, an idea the lawyer firmly rejected as reckless, reminding the team that federal court was not a marketing stage. Yet internal notes suggested the actor viewed the situation as both legal battle and brand preservation, a mindset that deeply alarmed counsel, especially when draft motions began including bizarre pop culture references and unsupported claims about unrelated public figures influencing online sentiment. With no citations, no evidence, and no procedural relevance, prompting the lawyer to order entire drafts scrapped while receiving sarcastic pushback implying blame could just as easily shift to random bystanders, a tone that signaled the process had drifted far from legitimate advocacy, leading the attorney to send a final memo to the client's legal and PR teams warning that their current plan lacked factual foundation, risked violating professional conduct rules, and could trigger severe disciplinary consequences if a judge scrutinized the origins of their materials, further cautioning that internal communications might be interpreted as premeditated narrative manipulation rather than good faith legal strategy, and raising concerns about potential corporate scrutiny if marketing resources tied to film promotion were perceived as supporting media narratives connected to the dispute, a scenario he described as turning the courtroom into a public relations minefield he refused to step into. Yet instead of recalibrating, representatives allegedly asked him to soften the memo's language and remove statements that sounded too alarmist, a request he ignored before forwarding the warning to partners at his firm, attaching his resignation, and departing abruptly, after which he reportedly shared internal documents with opposing counsel, including email chains and draft filings that illustrated efforts to design court submissions for emotional impact and viral visibility rather than evidentiary strength, with suggestions ranging from inserting comedy references to structuring arguments around internet culture tropes, proposals he declined to endorse, and additional drafts revealing the actor's direct participation in conceptualizing motions centered on psychological interpretations of a rival's public demeanor despite lacking witnesses or verified records, reinforcing his private characterization of the approach as coordinated narrative shaping through legal instruments, a view later echoed in formal responses that criticized the strategy as an abuse of process driven by celebrity influence and headline appeal instead of legal merit. And beyond theatrical filings, the materials allegedly exposed the broader engineering of a campaign where timing of submissions, media cycles, and public perception were treated as interconnected levers, a philosophy the lawyer believed endangered not only the case, but the integrity of everyone attached to it, ultimately concluding that continuing would place him in the position of fall guy if authorities or regulators examined the conduct, a risk he deemed unacceptable, turning his exit into a cautionary tale within legal circles about the collision between entertainment branding and courtroom ethics, where the pressure to control narrative can tempt powerful figures to treat litigation like another production, complete with scripts, staging, and audience reactions. While seasoned counsel must decide whether to play along or walk away to protect their license, reputation, and professional oath. A dilemma that underscored the fragile boundary between advocacy and spectacle in modern celebrity disputes. The so-called witness pool became another flashpoint in the unraveling legal saga, as internal documents revealed the controversial use of group pleading, a tactic in which numerous peripheral figures were listed in filings despite lacking direct connection to the central dispute, a move critics say artificially inflated the case's scale and spectacle. With various industry professionals and corporate entities named in motions that appeared designed more to generate pressure and headlines than to establish liability, including one subpoena request so questionable it drew immediate rejection, targeting a tangential acquaintance of a public figure based solely on a coincidental past interaction, justified under the vague theory that the person might have observed emotionally charged behavior, rationale the overseeing court reportedly dismissed without hesitation. While in private correspondence, the departing attorney described the broader approach as legal gaslighting and emotional leverage dressed up as procedure, arguing the objective was not a courtroom victory, but strategic overload, where multiplying names, claims, and filings would strain the opposing side's resources and saturate media coverage with confusion, a concern echoed in an internal firm memo warning that submitting certain drafts could invite severe professional discipline due to their lack of factual grounding, especially one proposed filing that alleged indirect narrative harm by an uninvolved company. Without evidentiary support, alongside internal chat logs suggesting pressure to maintain constant public momentum by adding new recognizable names to successive filing waves so attention would not fade, a tactic that briefly succeeded in fueling speculation across blogs and commentary sites, but repeatedly faltered under judicial scrutiny. As formal responses from opposing counsel methodically challenged the group pleading strategy, citing absent evidence, wasted court time, and reputational damage to individuals pulled in for dramatic effect, underscoring that earlier warnings from within the legal team had gone unheeded, making the attorney's resignation less a dramatic exit than a protective firewall, and the subsequent disclosure of documents a decisive rupture that exposed the mechanics of a campaign treating litigation as narrative theater, leaving the court with an unusually clear view of how spectacle and legal process collided. A high-profile legal battle reportedly exposed the growing tension between public relations strategy and courtroom ethics, as internal communications suggested that narrative control had become just as important to certain celebrity teams as legal merit, with filings allegedly shaped to create headline impact rather than judicial clarity, turning formal briefs into vehicles for emotional framing, viral phrasing, and audience engagement, a shift that alarmed at least one veteran attorney who warned that replacing legal reasoning with publicity language risked undermining credibility before the court, particularly after draft motions were circulated featuring dramatic first-person statements, rhetorical flourishes, and phrasing more common in opinion essays than federal pleadings, prompting the lawyer to annotate margins with blunt objections that such content was inadmissible, irrelevant, and reputationally damaging to submit, yet internal discussions reportedly emphasized maintaining narrative momentum, with staff analyzing trending topics, online reactions, and social media sentiment as if preparing a media rollout rather than a litigation strategy, color-coding emotional terminology, revising paragraphs to align with public discourse, and debating whether technical citations made filings feel too dense for public consumption. Language that framed the broader public as an audience rather than the judge as the decision-maker, a distinction the attorney found deeply troubling, especially when non-legal staff began forwarding viral comments and suggesting those sentiments be echoed in future briefs, blurring the boundary between legal advocacy and reputation management. While the attorney's attempts to restore conventional structure and evidentiary grounding were allegedly met with resistance from communications advisors who argued that persuasive storytelling required bold hooks, humanized framing, and memorable lines capable of traveling beyond the courtroom, reflecting a philosophy that saw litigation as one component of a larger media ecosystem, where perception could influence outcomes indirectly, an approach the lawyer described privately as ghostwriting for online content rather than practicing law. And concerns intensified when strategic discussions reportedly focused on leveraging celebrity associations and public goodwill as informal character reinforcement, despite questions about relevance or admissibility, illustrating how fame itself was viewed as a persuasive asset, while proposals to coordinate timing between media chatter and legal filings further blurred ethical lines, suggesting a model in which narrative waves could be generated to create momentum, a tactic critics later labeled prejudicial manipulation rather than advocacy. All of which led the attorney to issue internal warnings that such strategies might expose participants to professional scrutiny if courts interpreted them as attempts to game procedure or influence perception outside formal evidence, ultimately portraying a cautionary example of how modern celebrity disputes can drift into spectacle when branding logic overtakes legal discipline, forcing practitioners to choose between participating in narrative theater or stepping away to protect professional standards. As the episode became an industry case study in the risks of treating the justice system like a stage where virality competes with validity and storytelling eclipses substance. The timing of media drops to filings became a major flashpoint in a high-profile legal drama, with internal sources describing the strategy as a dangerous blend of publicity and litigation, a push that alarmed a senior attorney who repeatedly warned that coordinating outside the court messaging with formal motions could be viewed as bad faith litigation, yet those cautions were ignored. And soon a controversial draft emerged that blended pop culture references with legal arguments, including a section dubbed Emotional Narrative Framing and Pop Culture as Pain Translation, which the lawyer deemed entirely inadmissible, even as a leading actor on the team reportedly encouraged its inclusion, arguing that the fanbase would defend the approach regardless of judicial outcome. An email flagged in internal records described the tactic as leveraging audience loyalty rather than legal strength, while the attorney resisted, emphasizing that filings were meant for judges, not viral content, yet. The drafts continued to arrive filled with celebrity testimonials, meme suggestions, and layered messaging strategies intended to create the impression of spontaneous media revelations, including coordinated leaks to blogs followed days later by formal motions to produce the illusion of organic discovery, a method internally labeled shock and seal, which the attorney flagged as prejudicial manipulation, warning that courts might interpret it as attempts to influence perception outside of proper legal procedure, while non-legal staff reportedly weighed in on edits, color-coded emotional phrasing, and recommended inserting trending commentary to generate sympathetic resonance, all of which turned formal pleadings into quasi-marketing instruments, and draft margins showed repeated notes rejecting unverified quotes, social media analysis, and narrative framing as irrelevant to evidence or admissibility. Yet team members allegedly continued to insist on their inclusion, creating an ethical and procedural standoff that culminated in the lawyer's resignation, which he described internally as a necessary firewall to protect professional standards, and shortly thereafter, he reportedly shared internal documents with opposing counsel, detailing the interplay of PR strategy, narrative engineering, and legal filings, providing a blueprint of how media influence and litigation were being entwined, illustrating attempts to generate emotional reactions through selective language, highlight celebrity involvement as proxy character evidence, and manipulate timing for maximum press impact, a combination that outside observers warned could trigger regulatory attention if corporate resources or promotional budgets were leveraged to support litigation campaigns, while the fallout extended beyond legal circles into commercial partnerships, as brand managers reportedly paused or reviewed ongoing endorsements tied to the celebrities involved, citing reputational risk and caution amid public scrutiny. With online sentiment shifting rapidly, trending memes and viral posts satirizing courtroom filings, and social commentary framing the drama as a spectacle, all while the attorney's earlier warnings about ethical exposure, narrative manipulation, and the potential for professional liability proved prescient, as subsequent filings and communications demonstrated the persistence of strategies that prioritized perception over procedural integrity, leaving the legal team destabilized, with attempts to recruit new counsel reportedly stalling due to concerns about navigating a hybrid of media management and litigation, and the broader story evolving into a cautionary case study on how celebrity influence, strategic communications, and court procedure can collide, generating a volatile mix of public fascination, legal risk, and professional consequences, showing that when narrative control is treated as paramount, even seasoned attorneys may choose to exit rather than compromise ethical standards, and the continued circulation of internal communications illustrates how closely intertwined media strategy and legal strategy had become, producing ripple effects across public perception, commercial relationships, and the integrity of the courtroom, ultimately highlighting the fragile balance between advocacy, spectacle, and the rule of law in high-stakes, high-visibility disputes where every action, every document, and every timing decision carries consequences far beyond the immediate case, leaving the team, the court, and the public to navigate the fallout of a scenario in which courtroom reality and media theater collided in unprecedented ways.